for this book. Oh, thank you very much. I forgot to start the recording. Thank you. So this was actually, when you think about it, was a very courageous of the author to write this kind of socio-political satire novel during this period of very restricted freedom of speech, oppression. And the author himself, we know relatively very little about him. His name is Jingzi. He lived from 1701 to 1754. He was born in Quanjiao in Anhui province, and he passed away in Jiangsu province in the great city of Yangzhou, which is not too far from his hometown where he was born. A little bit of background on the book itself. The structure of the book is it's a quote again novel with 56 chapters or episodes. In classic Chinese novel, there's the word for chapters is hui. Hui means like occurrence, and this is because these books were nominally written for storytellers. So each time a storyteller, performs at a tea house, each episode is called a hui, and then normally each chapter ends with at a critical point where the storyteller concludes with, if you want to find out what happens next, please join the next episode. And so I haven't read the whole book for decades now. As I said, this is one of my favorites, but I read it when I was very young. So my recollection is that the book is not truly a novel. That it's really in between a collection of short stories and a novel. There are some chapters that are completely independent. But there are then there are many chapters that are loosely connected. There are characters that do appear in one chapter, and then you don't see that character for a long time, and then in the much later chapter, that character comes back again. So it's a very interesting structure. And the story that we're reading today, Fanjin passing the provincial exam, the setting of the story is in the Guangdong province. It's the southernmost province in China, which is kind of interesting to me that the author picked to set the story in that province because it's far away from where he was born and where he passed away. So I imagine he may not have been to this part of China. It's definitely a kind of a remote place for him, but he chose to write the story in that setting. And the main character, Fan Jing, is from a county in Guangdong province called Panyu. It's part of the modern-day megacity of Guangzhou. And it took place the story setting is not in the author's own time, it's in the dynasty before him, the Ming dynasty. And this could be part of the reason I was talking about the literary inquisition that was going on in his own time, that it's much safer to write a political satire that talks about the previous dynasty. So just to show the geographical locations, in the two white circles is, on the upper side here, well, first of all, we're looking at the map of China. And so you see that he lived and died in the area that's in the Yangtze River region, not far from the eastern coast of China. So it's in the central eastern China. And then the story itself was set in the very southern side of China, this red symbol down here labels where it is. So it's in the very southern coast, not too far from Hong Kong. So before we go into the story, I think it's helpful to have an introduction into the whole schooling and imperial exam system that was in the Ming dynasty, because the story is really kind of centered on this whole system and people's behavior and attitude and views about it. So in the Ming dynasty, there was a very extensive public school system. So each county in China was required to have public schools. Each school with about 20 to 40 students and about one instructor for about roughly every 8 students or so. And not everyone could just go to the school. It was an honor. Enrollment required passing the county level exam, which I will talk about in the next slide. And the curriculum included studying the classics, history, law, imperial decrees, rights, archery, calligraphy, and math. And the qualified students were paid a monthly stipend, I think nominally in rice. And the students who could not get into the public school yet were called Tongshen. Tong means child and Shen means student. So kind of direct translation will be child student. I point this out because later in the story, you will see this term. And so remember this term, Tongshen, which is child student. So these are students who did not qualify to get into the public school. So Fan Jin, our main character in this story, in the beginning of the story, he was a Tongshen. He was a child student, even though he was already an old man, which I thought that was kind of funny. And there wasn't any official graduation from school. Instead, there were 3 ways that you get out of school, that you quote finish school. One is that you take and pass the provincial level imperial exam. Or if you're an excellent student, you get nominated to the Guozijian, which is basically the national academy in the capital. Think of it as going to a national university. Or if you're past the age of 50, then you're permitted to withdraw from school. So let's talk about the imperial exam system. So starting from the very lowest level. So the lowest level is the county level exam, which is in Chinese is called 院试. And when you pass that, what do you get? Well, you get the enrollment into the above mentioned public school. So you get to be a paid student in the public school. And you also win a special title called 秀才, which direct translation is something roughly like fine talent. Or another alternative name is 生源, direct translation is something like being a staff student. So while you're a student in a public school, there are regular major exams that take place. One is called 岁试. Roughly translation, direct translation is an annual exam. Even though it's not annual, it takes place once every 3 years. And basically you get tested on your scholastic achievements, stuff that you learn. And the results are ranked into 6 levels. If you wind up in levels 1 and 2, you get promoted to receive a higher stipend. If you're in level 3, there's no change. You get to maintain on your same level. If you get level 4, you get a reprimand, basically saying, didn't do so well, work harder. And if you wind up in level 5, you get demoted as a lower level student. And if you wind up in level 6, you get kicked out of school. And if you sustain in the top levels in multiple exam years, then you get the honor of being nominated and recommended into the 国子监, which is in the capital city, in the national capital, and as a 太学生, which means grand student. And then another regular exam while you are a student in the county schools is 科试. And this also takes place once every 3 years, specifically in the years when the 乡试, the provincial level exams take place. And if you do well in this exam, that's how you get, that's your ticket to be able to be qualified to take the 乡试, to take the provincial level. So in our story, Fan Jin, the first test that he took was this test. And he got promoted, he got qualified to take the next one in the story. Sorry, with Zoom, there's always had to move around all these boxes so I can see the slides. That's one thing I don't love about Zoom. So the provincial exams, that's serious business here. So it also takes place once every 3 years in the autumn. So in Chinese, it's also another nickname is called 秋闱, which basically says it's the autumn exam. And it's presided over by 2 chief examiners and 4 associate examiners. They're all from the prestigious Hanlin Academy. And this is a very prestigious assignment to be a presiding examiner. And each test taker has to first be thoroughly searched, make sure you're not bringing in any cheat sheets and stuff like that. And then you are quarantined in a locked room for the duration of the test, with meals, everything you need served. The exam, I believe, took several days. I think 3 days, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you pass the exam, you get advanced to the national level exam called 会试. And the ones who pass also receive the special title of 举人. 举 means to raise something in Chinese, and 人 means person. So you're an elevated person. And this is the achievement in our story that Fan Jin achieved near the end of the story. And then, so the successful test takers move on to the national exam, which takes place in the capital city. In early Ming Dynasty, the capital was in Nanjing, and later in the Ming Dynasty, it was in Beijing. And at the national capital, this national exam also takes place once every 3 years, specifically in the year following the provincial exam. And it was always in the spring. And typically, each time, about roughly 300 people pass the exam. And then you're not done yet. When you pass the exam, you get the honor to move on to the Imperial court exam. And in the Imperial court exam, it's actually, you literally take the test in the palace, and the test is presided by the emperor. And the ones who pass are ranked into 3 different levels. In Chinese is 一甲, 二甲, and 三甲. And you receive the honorary title if you pass of Jingzi. Rough translations like advanced scholar. And you, at that point, you actually receive government assignments to become civil servants. And the level of the assignment is according to your ranking, whether you're in category 1, 2, or 3. And the top ones, I think the first 2 levels, you get the top assignments are going into the Hanling Academy, which is basically a secretariat for the emperor. So this was in the olden days, becoming a Jingzi was really a huge deal. Number one, you get to claim that you're a direct student of the emperor. And number 2, you become a staff member of the imperial court. You're one of the secretaries of the emperor. And from that, you normally you serve a number of years there, and then you get very good assignments into other government posts. And the top three finishers have special titles of 状元, 榜眼, and 探花. Okay, so anyway, so we know we all have a basic understanding, probably more than you care to learn, about the whole exam system. So let's actually together read the book. I mean, not the book, but the story itself. And let me switch to that. So we're going to start from the middle of the chapter, the first scene where Fan Jing actually appears. And it's a little bit long for one person to read. So how about we do it in 3 segments, and I would very much appreciate a couple of volunteers. And if no one volunteers, I think I'll just pick on people. So I'll read the first 10 paragraphs, and then I'll look for volunteers. So can everyone see the text okay, or is it too small?
It's a little small.
Yeah, okay, let me see what I can do here. How's that? I know the English type font is it's kind of tiny. Is that legible?
That's better.
Let's see if I can make it even bigger. Okay, let's go with this. So the story, the point that we're reading, it's in the middle of the exam. It's already ongoing, and this is where Fan Jing starts to appear to the scene. Okay, and the third examination was for candidates from Nanhai and Panyu counties. Commissioner Zhou, so Commissioner Zhou is the chief examiner, sat in the hall and watched the child students crowding in. So yeah, in Chinese, the translation here is candidates, but it's that term in Chinese, actually that term that I just told you about, the child student. So these were the students that didn't make it yet into the public schools, and they're taking the test to try to make it. There were young and old, handsome and homely, smart and shabby men among them. The last candidate to enter was thin and sallow, had a grizzled beard, and was wearing an old felt hat. Guangdong province has a warm climate. Still, this was the 12th month, and yet this candidate had on a linen gown only. So he was shivering with cold as he took his paper and went to his cell. Zhou Jin, so this is the chief examiner, made a mental note of this before sealing up their doors. During the first interval, from his seat at the head of the hall, he watched this candidate in the linen gown come up to hand in his paper. The man's clothes were so threadbare that a few more holes had appeared since he went into the cell. Commissioner Zhou looked at his own garments, his magnificent crimson robe and gilt belt. Then he referred to the register of names and asked, "You are Fan Jin, aren't you?" Kneeling, Fan Jin answered, "Yes, Your Excellency." "How old are you this year?" "I gave my age as 30. Actually, I'm 54. So basically, he put down in the records, he lied about his age. He put down as 30, but he's in fact 54 years old. "How many times have you taken the examination?" "I first went in for it when I was 20, and I have taken it over 20 times since then." "How is it that you have never passed?" "My essays are too poor," replied Fan Jin, "so none of the honorable examiners will pass me." "That may not be the only reason," said Commissioner Zhou. "Leave your paper here, and I will read it through carefully." Fan Jin kowtowed and left. It was still early, and no other candidates were coming to hand in their papers. So Commissioner Zhou picked up Fan Jin's essay and read it through, but he was disappointed. Whatever is the fellow driving at in this essay, he wondered. I see now why he never passed. He put it aside. However, when no other candidates appeared, he thought, I might as well have another look at Fan Jin's paper. If he shows the least bit of talent, I'll pass him to reward his perseverance. He read it through again, and this time felt there was something in it. He was just going to read it through once more when another candidate came up to hand in his paper. This man knelt down and said, Sir, I beg for an oral test. I have your paper here, said Commissioner Zhou kindly. What need is there for an oral test? I can compose poems in all the ancient styles. I beg you to set a subject to test me. The commissioner frowned and said, since the emperor attaches importance to essays, why should you bring up the poems of the Han and Tang dynasties? A candidate like you should devote all his energy into writing compositions instead of wasting time on heterodox studies. I have come here at the Imperial command to examine essays, not to discuss miscellaneous literary forms with you. This devotion to superfluous things means that your real work must be neglected. No doubt your essay is nothing but flashy talk, not worth the reading. Attendants, drive him out. At the word of command, attendants ran in from both sides to seize the candidate and pushed him outside the gate. By the way, I don't know why they didn't translate it. So this one that was thrown out, his name is Wei Haogu. So his surname is Wei, and Haogu means love for antiquity. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek name because he has to be tested on his abilities in ancient poetry. But although Commissioner Zhou had his man driven out, he still read his paper. This candidate was called Wei Haogu. Oh, okay, sorry, there it is. And he wrote in the, so Wei Haogu again, love for the antiquities. And he wrote in a tolerable and tolerably clear and straightforward style. I will pass him on the lowest, as lowest on the list, Zhou Jin decided. And taking up his brush, he made a mark at the end of the paper as a reminder. Then he read Fan Jin's paper again. This time he gave a gasp of amazement. Even I failed to understand this paper the first 2 times I read it, he exclaimed. But after reading it for the 3rd time, I realize it is the most wonderful essay in the world, ever word a pearl. This shows how often bad examiners must have surpassed real genius. Hastily taking up his brush, he carefully drew 3 circles on Fanjin's paper, making it as first. He then picked up Wei Haogu's paper again and marked it as the 20th. After this, he collected all the other essays and took them away with him. Soon the results were published, and Fanjin's name was first on the list. When he went in to see the commissioner, Zhou Jing commended him warmly. And when the last successful candidate, Wei Haogu, went in, Commissioner Zhou gave him some encouragement and advised him to work hard and stop studying miscellaneous works. Then, to the sound of drums and trumpets, the successful candidates left. The next day, Commissioner Zhou set off for the capital. Fanjin alone escorted him for 10 miles of the way, doing reverence before his chair. Then the commissioner called him to his side. First-class honors go to the mature, he said. Your essays show the real maturity, and you are certain to do well in the provincial examination. After I have made my report to the authorities, I will wait for you in the capital. He meant the state capital. Fanjin kowtowed again in thanks, then stood to one side of the road as the examiner's chariot was carried off swiftly. Only when the banners had passed out of sight behind the next hill, did he turn back to his lodgings to settle his bill. His home was about 15 miles from the city, and he had to travel all night to reach it. He bowed to his mother, who lived with him in a thatched cottage with a thatched shed outside. His mother occupying the front room and his wife the back one. His wife was the daughter of Butcher Hu of the market. Fanjin's mother and wife were delighted by his success. They were preparing a meal when his father-in-law arrived, bringing pork sausages and a bottle of wine. Fanjin greeted him, and they sat down together. Since I had the bad luck to marry my daughter to a scarecrow like you, said Butcher Hu, heaven knows how much you have cost me. Now I must have done some good deed to make you pass the examination. I brought this wine to celebrate. Fanjin assented meekly and called his wife to cook the sausages and warm the wine. He and his father-in-law sat in the thatched shed, while his mother and wife prepared food in the kitchen. Now that you have become a gentleman, went on with Butcher Hu, you must do things in the proper style. Of course, many in my profession are decent, high-class people, and I'm your elder too. You mustn't put on any airs before me. But these peasants around here, dung carriers and the like, are low people. If you greet them and treat them as equals, that will be a breach of etiquette and will make me lose face too. You're such an easygoing, good-for-nothing fellow. I'm telling you this for your own good, so that you won't make a laughing stock out of yourself. Your advice is quite right, father, replied Fanjin. Let your mother eat with us too, went on Butcher Hu. She has only vegetables usually. It's a shame. Let my daughter join us too. She couldn't have tasted lard more than 2 or 3 times since she married you a dozen years ago. Poor thing. So Fanjin's mother and wife sat down to share the meal with them. They ate until sunset, by which time Butcher Hu was tipsy. Mother and son thanked him profusely. Then throwing his jacket over his shoulders, the butcher staggered home bloated. The next day, Fanjin had to call on relatives and friends. Wei Haogu, that's the other candidate that finished last. Wei Haogu invited him to meet some other fellow candidates, and since it was the year for the provincial examination, they held a number of literary meetings. Soon it was the end of the 6th month. Fanjin's fellow candidates asked him to go with them to the provincial capital for the examination, but he had no money for the journey. He went to ask his father-in-law for help, Butcher, who spat in his face and poured out a torrent of abuse. "Don't be a fool," he roared. "Just passing one examination has turned your head completely. You're like a toad trying to swallow a swan. And I hear that you scraped through not because of your essay, but because the examiner pitied you for being old. Now, like a fool, you want to pass the higher examination and become an official. How do you know who these officials, but do you even know who these officials are? They're all stars in the heaven. Look at the Zhang family in the city. All those officials have pots of money, dignified faces, and big ears. But your mouth sticks out and you have a chin like an ape's. You should piss on the ground and look at your face in the puddle. You look like a monkey, yet you want to become an official. Come off it. Next year, I shall find a teaching job for you with one of my friends, so that you can make a few taels of silver to support that old, never dying mother of yours and your wife. And it's high time you did. Yet you asked me for traveling expenses? I kill just one pig a day. I only make 10 cents per pig. If I give you all my silver to play ducks and drakes with, my family will have nothing to live on." The butcher went on cursing at full blast till Fanjin's head spun. All right, any volunteers to read the next segment?
Well, I can do it.
Oh, CK, are you volunteering?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, before I do that, does anybody know what ducks and drakes mean?
Let me read the Chinese because I.
Yeah, I know. So you get a flat stone on or a lake or something, right? And you skimming it across the surface of the.
Yep.
That's ducks and drakes.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
That's an English term.
Yeah.
Very English.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I did not know that. I'm reading the Chinese. What he's actually said is, butcher one pig a day and make little money. And why would I give you my silver so that you can throw it in the water? Okay, so that's a more direct translation. Okay, thank you.
So I should start here, right? Number 20, isn't it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. When he got home again, he thought to himself, Commissioner Zhou said that I showed maturity. And from ancient times till now, whoever passed the first examination without going in for the second, I shan't rest easy till I've taken it. So he asked his fellow candidates to help him and went to the city without telling his father-in-law to take the examination. When the examination was over, he returned home only to find that his family had had no food for 2 days, and Butcher who cursed him again. The day the results came out, there was nothing to eat in the house, and Fanjin's mother told him, "Take that hen of mine to the market and sell it, then buy a few measures of rice to make gruel. I'm faint with hunger." Fanjin tucked the hen under his arm and hurried out. He had only been gone an hour or so when gongs sounded and 3 horsemen galloped up. They alighted, tethered the horses to the shed, and called out, "Where is the Honorable Mr. Fan? We have come to congratulate him on passing the provincial examination." Not knowing what had happened, Fan Jin's mother had hidden herself in the house for fear. But when she heard that he had passed, she plucked up courage to poke her head out and say, "Please come in and sit down. My son has gone out." "So this is the old lady," said the heralds, and they pressed forward to demand a tip. In the midst of this excitement, 2 more batches of horsemen arrived. Some squeezed inside while the others packed themselves into the shed, where they had to sit on the ground. Neighbors gathered round too to watch, and the flustered old lady asked one of them to go to look for her son. The neighbor ran to the marketplace, but Fan Jin was nowhere to be seen. Only when he reached the east end of the market did he discover the scholar, clutching the hand tightly against his chest and holding a sales sign in one hand. Fan Jin was pacing slowly along, looking right and left for a customer. "Go home quickly, Mr. Fan," cried the neighbor. "Congratulations, you have passed the provincial examination. Your house is full of heralds." Thinking this fellow was making fun of him, Fan Jin pretended not to hear and walked forward with lowered head. Seeing that he paid no attention, the neighbor went up to him and tried to grab the hand. "Why are you taking my hand?" protested Fan Jin. "You don't want to buy it." "You have passed," insisted the neighbor. "They want you to go home to send off the heralds." "Good neighbor," said Fan Jin, "we have no rice left at home, so I have to sell this hand. It's a matter of life and death. This is no time for jokes. Do go away, so as not to spoil my chance of a sale." When the neighbor saw that Fan Jin did not believe him, he seized the hand, threw it to the ground, and dragged the scholar back by main force to his home. The heralds cried, "Good, the newly honored one is back." They pressed forward to congratulate him, but Fan Jin brushed past them into the house to look at the official announcement already hung up, which read, "This is to announce that the master of your honorable mention, Fan Jin, has passed the provincial examination in Guangdong, coming 7th in the list. May better news follow in rapid succession." Fan Jin feasted his eyes on this announcement, and after reading it through once to himself, read it once more aloud. Clapping his hands, he laughed and exclaimed, "Ha! Good, I have passed." Then stepping back, he fell down in a dead faint. His mother hastily poured some boiled water between his lips, whereupon he recovered consciousness and struggled to his feet. Clapping his hands again, he let out a peal of laughter and shouted, "Aha, I've passed, I've passed." Laughing wildly, he ran outside, giving the heralds and the neighbors the fright of their lives. Not far from the front door, he slipped and fell into a pond. When he clambered out, his hair was disheveled, his hands muddied and his whole body dripping with slime. But nobody could stop him. Still clapping his hands and laughing, he headed straight for the market. They all looked at each other in consternation and said, "The new honor has sent him off his head." His mother wailed, "Aren't we out of luck? Why should passing an examination do this to him? Now he's mad. Goodness knows when he'll get better." "He was all right this morning when he went out," said his wife. "What could have brought on this attack? What shall we do?" The neighbors consoled them. "Don't be upset," they said. "We will send a couple of men to keep an eye on Mr. Fan, and we'll all bring wine and eggs and rice for these heralds. Then we can discuss what's to be done." The neighbors brought eggs or wine, lugged along sacks of rice, or carried over chickens. Fan Jin's wife wailed as she prepared the food in the kitchen. Then she took it to the shed. Neighbors brought tables and stools, and they asked the heralds to sit down to a meal while they discussed what to do. "I have an idea," said one of the heralds, "but I don't know whether it will work or not." "What idea?" they asked. "There must be someone the Honorable Mr. Fan usually stands in awe of," said the herald. "He's only been thrown off his balance because sudden joy made him choke on his phlegm. But if you can get someone he's afraid of to slap him in the face and say, it's all a joke, you haven't passed any examination, then the fright will make him cough up his phlegm and he'll come to his senses again. They all clapped their hands and said, that's a fine idea. Mr. Fan is more afraid of Butcher Hu than of anyone else. Let's hurry up and fetch him. He's probably still in the market and hasn't yet heard the news. If he were selling meat in the market, he would have heard the news by now, said a neighbor. He went out at dawn to the East Market to fetch pigs, and he can't have come back yet. Someone had better go quickly to find him. One of the neighbors hurried off in search of the butcher and presently met him on the road, followed by an assistant who was carrying 7 or 8 catties of meat and 4 or 5 strings of cash. Butcher Hu was coming to offer his congratulations. Fan Jin's mother, crying bitterly, told him what had happened. How could he be so unlucky? Exclaimed the butcher. They were calling for him outside, so he gave the meat and the money to his daughter and went out. The heralds put their plan before him, but Butcher Hu demurred. He may be my son-in-law, he said, but he's an official now, one of the stars in heaven. How can you hit one of the stars in heaven? I've heard that whoever hits the stars in heaven will be carried away by the king of hell, given 100 strokes with an iron rod, and shut up in the 18th hell, never to become a human being again. I dare not do such a thing like that.
CK, so you've done the 10 paragraphs. Do you want to continue, or should we solicit another reader?
I think I need a drink.
Yes, I think so. But that's a perfect stopping point. So you see, everyone, you see the change of fortune here overnight in the attitude of his father-in-law. Okay, any volunteers?
I can.
Great. You take the mic, Kyle.
I haven't have the book, so I actually can read it also from here, but I'll read it from the Zoom. So forgive me if I mispronounce any Chinese names, if I don't get this correct, but so it's Emperor Zhou, that's how you say it?
Yeah, very good. Perfect.
Okay. Emperor Zhou picks out, Mr. Hu, cried a sarcastic neighbor, you make your living by killing pigs. Every day the blade goes in white and comes out red. After all the blood you shed, the king of hell must have marked you down for several thousand strokes by iron rods. So what does it matter if he adds 1,000 more, 100 more? Quite likely he will have used up all his iron rods before getting round to beating you for this anyway. Or maybe if you cure your son-in-law, the king of hell may consider that as a good deed and promote you from the 18th hell to the 17th. This is no time for joking, protested one of the heralds. This is the only way to handle it, Mr. Hu. There's nothing else for it, so please don't make difficulties. Butcher Hu had to give in. 2 bowls of wine bolstered up his courage, making him lose his scruples and start his usual rampaging. Rolling up his greasy sleeves, he strode off toward the market, followed by small groups of neighbors. Fan Jin's mother ran out and called after him. Just frighten him a little. Don't mind you, don't hurt him. Of course, the neighbors reassured her. That goes without saying. When wait, I'm trying to your face is, can you just go up a little bit because your face is it's blocking the bit of, oh thanks. When they reached the market, they found Fan Jin standing in the doorway of a temple. His hair was tousled, his face streaked with mud, and one of his shoes had come off, but he was still clapping his hands and crying, aha, I've passed. Butcher Hu bore down on him like as an avenging fury, roaring, you blasted idiot, what have you passed? And fetched him a blow. The bystanders and neighbors could hardly suppress their laughter, but although Butcher Hu had screwed up his courage to strike once, he was still afraid at heart, and his hand was trembling too much to strike a second time. The one blow, however, been enough to knock Fan Jin out. Okay, good. That's good. The neighbors pressed round to rub Fan Jin's chest and massage his back until presently he gave a sigh and came to. His eyes were clear and his madness had passed. They helped him up and borrowed a bench from Apothecary Chen, a hunchback who lived hard by the temple, so that Fan Jin might sit down. Butcher Hu was standing a little way off, felt his hand begin to ache. And when he raised his palm, he found to his dismay that she could not bend it. It's true then that you mustn't strike the stars in heaven, he thought. Now Buddha is punishing me. The more he thought about it, the worse his hand hurt, and he asked the apothecary to give him some ointment for it. Meanwhile, Fanjin was looking around and asking, how have I come to be sitting here? My mind has been in a whirl as if in a dream. The neighbor said, congratulations, sir, on having passed the examination. A short time ago in your happiness, you brought up some phlegm, but just now you spat out several mouthfuls and recovered. Please go home quickly to send away the heralds. That's right, said Fanjin. And I seem to remember coming seventh in the list. As he was speaking, he fastened up his hair and asked the apothecary for a basin of water to wash his face. But one of the neighbors found his shoe and helped him put it on. The sight of his father-in-law made Fanjin afraid that he was in for another cursing, but Butcher Hu stood forward and said, worthy son-in-law, would never have presumed to slap you just now if not for your mother. She sent me to help you. That was what I call a friendly slap, said one of the neighbors. Wait till Mr. Fan finishes washing his face. I bet he can easily wash off half a basin of lard. Mr. Hu, said another, this hand of yours will be too good to kill pigs anymore. No, indeed, replied the butcher. Why should I go on killing pigs? My worthy son-in-law will be able to support me in style for the rest of my life. I always said that this worthy son-in-law of mine was very learned and handsome, and that not one of those Chong and Zhou family officials in the city looked so much the fine gentleman. I've always been a good judge of character. I don't mind telling you. My daughter stayed at home till she was more than 30, although many rich families wanted to marry her to their sons, but I saw signs of good fortune in her face, and I knew that she'd end up by marrying an official. You see today how right I was. He gave a great guffaw, and they all started to laugh. When Fanjin had washed and drunk the tea brought him by the apothecary, they all started back. Fanjin in front, Butcher Hu and the neighbors behind. The butcher, noticing that the seat of his son-in-law's gown was crumpled, kept bending forward all the way to tug out the creases for him. When they reached Fanjin's house, Butcher Hu shouted, the master is back. The old lady came out to greet him and was overjoyed to find her son no longer mad. The herald, she told them, had already been sent out with the money that Butcher Hu had brought. Fanjin bowed to his mother and thanked his father-in-law, making Butcher Hu so embarrassed that he muttered, that bit of money was nothing. After thanking the neighbors too, Fanjin was just going to sit down when a smart-looking retainer hurried in, holding a big red card, and announced, Mr. Zhang has come to pay his respects to the newly successful Mr. Fan. By this time, the sedan chair was already at the door. Butcher Hu dived into his daughter's room and dared not come out while the neighbors scattered in all directions. Fanjin went out to welcome the visitor, who was one of the local gentry, and Mr. Zhang alighted from this chair and came in. He was wearing an official's gauze cap, sunflower-colored gown, gilt belt, and black shoes. He was a provincial graduate and had served as the magistrate in this time. His name was Zhai. He and Fanjin made way for each other ceremoniously, and once inside the house, bowed to each other as equals and sat down in the places of guest and host. Mr. Zhang began the conversation. Sir, he said, although we live in the same district, I have never been able to call on you. I have long respected you, replied Fanjin, but I have never had the chance to pay you a visit. Just now I saw the list of successful candidates. Your patron, Mr. Tang, was a pupil of my grandfather, so I feel very close to you. I do not deserve to pass, I am afraid, said Fanjin, but I'm delighted to be the pupil of one of your family. After a glance around the room, Mr. Zhang remarked, Sir, you are certainly frugal. He took from a servant a packet of silver and stated, I brought nothing to show my respect. Brought nothing to show my respect except these 50 taels of silver, which I beg you to accept. Your honorable home is not good enough for you and will not be very convenient when you have many callers. I have an empty house on the main street by the east gate, which has 3 courtyards with 3 rooms in each. Although it is not big, it is quite clean. Allow me to present it to you. When you move there, I can profit by your instruction more easily. Fanjin declined many times, but Mr. Zhang pressed him. With what all we have in common, we should be like brothers, he said. But if you refuse, you are treating me like a stranger. Then Fanjin accepted the silver and expressed his thanks. After some more conversation, they bowed and parted. Not until the visitor was in his chair did Butcher Hu dare to emerge.
Are you how are you getting a little tired?
I think it's good for now. Yeah, I think it's good. If you have if someone else wants to do it, or I think there was like 9-10 of them.
There's only a couple more paragraphs, so I can finish it up if you like.
Okay.
If you want to break. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you so much. That was great. Fan Jin gave the silver to his wife. When she opened it and they saw the white ingots with their fine markings, he asked Butcher Hu to come in and gave him 2 ingots and said, saying, "Just now I troubled you for 5,000 coppers. Please accept these 6 taels of silver." Butcher Hu gripped the silver tight, but thrust out his clenched fist, saying, "You keep this. I gave you that money to congratulate you, so how can I take it back?" "I have some more silver here," said Fan Jin. "When it is spent, I will ask you for more." Butcher Hu immediately drew back his fist, stuffed the silver in his pocket, and said, "All right, now that you're on good terms with that Mr. Zhang, you needn't be afraid of going short. His family has more silver than the emperor, and they are my best customers. Every year, even if they have no particular occasions to celebrate, they still buy 4,000 or 5,000 caddies of meat. Silver is nothing to him." Then he turned to his daughter and said, "Your rascally brother didn't want me to bring that money this morning. I told him, now my honorable son-in-law is not the man he was. There will be lots of people sending him presents of money. I am only afraid he may refuse my gift. Wasn't I right? Now I shall take this silver home and curse that dirty scoundrel." After 1,000 thanks, he made off, his head thrust forward and a broad grin on his face. True enough, many people came to Fan Jin after that and made him presents of land and shops, while some poor couples came to serve him in return for his protection. In 2 or 3 months, he had men servants and maid servants, to say nothing of more of money and rice. When Mr. Zhang came again to urge him, he moved into the new house, and for 3 days he entertained guests with feasts and operas. On the morning of the 4th day, after Fan Jin's mother had gotten up and had breakfast, she went to the rooms in the back courtyard. There she found Fan Jin's wife with a silver pin in her hair. Although this was the middle of the 10th month, it was still warm and she was wearing a sky blue silk tunic and a green silk skirt. She was supervising the maids as they washed bowls, cups, plates, and chopsticks. "You must be very careful," the old lady warned them. "These things don't belong to us, so don't break them." "How can you say they don't belong to you, madam?" they asked. "They're all yours." No, these aren't ours," she protested with a smile. "Oh, yes, they are," the maids cried. "Not only these things, but all of us servants and this house belong to you." When the old lady heard this, she picked up the fine porcelain and the cups and chopsticks inlaid with silver and examined them carefully one by one. Then she went into a fit of laughter. "All mine," she crowed. Screaming with laughter, she fell backwards, choked, and lost consciousness. But to know what became of the old lady, you must read the next chapter. So that's it. And actually, if you indulge me, let me find a short video. So what I'm looking for is So, okay, sorry. So what I'm going to show is this story has actually been made into a Beijing opera. And so I'm going to show the part of the opera where I'm going to start from the point where one of the heralds came up with the idea to find someone that Fanjin is always scared of, and to slap him and wake him out of this trance. And so let me share that. So let me know, do you see like a frozen scene from a stage show?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah. So all right. So the guy in the middle with in the red vest and the blue outfit. So that's one of the heralds, and he's suggesting this idea. And the father-in-law, the butcher, is the older man with a white beard on the right, in the black outfit and the black hat and the orange belt. Sorry, I don't use Zoom a lot, so can you actually hear the sound when I was playing it?
No, I've got no sound.
No, you could click.
I think you have to connect it to the computer audio, like when you share screen audio, like that's what you have to share
Right.
audio with the browser. I think that's how you do it.
It's
Like,
yeah,
have to do-
it's exactly it.
How do you do it?
You have to go to share.
Go to share
I don't know.
Share the
computer
audio?
Under
Okay.
share. Yeah, there's a little box where you check in and it says share audio.
Yeah,
Oh,
Once
okay.
you're sharing the screen.
yeah.
Might be easier to exit out of that and then go to share screen again and then click.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me do that. So wait, so I stopped the sharing and then,
If you go to the share screen, and then there should be a little box at the bottom where you check it, and that will share the audio.
okay. Oh, share sound, all right. So the older woman in the middle is the mother, and then the woman that's to her right is the wife.
别配！说着说着，啪，给他个大嘴巴，他一害怕，他一下去，八成就好了。
此计甚好，阿婆母，但不知他平日最怕何
He's
人？
asking who is he afraid of?
怕的么？
是啊，他平时他最怕谁呀？
就是亲家你
She said
呀。
He's afraid of you the
哎
most.
呦，那可不成
He said, "No, I
啊！
can't do this."
他虽然是我的女婿，但如今他中了举人了，那就
He's
是
a
举
scholar
人
now.
老爷。我常听人家说呀，那举人老爷 那都是天上的文曲
He
星。
must be a star from the
要是
sky.
打了天上文曲星，要被阎王爷知道了，要打他100铁棍儿，还要压在18层地狱下面，
After I die, I'm gonna go to the
不到
18th
太山大。
levels of
我可
hell
不
and
敢，
get
我可
under
不
hits
敢。
by the iron rod.
嘿，我这糊涂货，你每天杀猪，白道的进去，红道的出来的，要是让阎王爷知道了，你得挨上几百条铁棍儿啊！
He said, "You're basically you already got a lot of
哎
dead in
呀，
hell."
亲家，你要救他一救
哎呦，
啊！
亲家母，我不能打
We're
呀！
begging him to do it.
范老爷得了疯病，你若不打，上司怪罪，我就拿你试问。
哎呦，胡老爷，
He said, "If you don't help, I'm
我
gonna
不敢打
get the
呀！
magistrate to arrest you."
不必害怕，你若打他，他的病就好了，他就是老爷了。你若不打他，他的病不好，你的富贵也就无有了。
是啊，富贵呀！
So they're all urging him to do it.
我打！哎，我先喝口酒。
对，壮壮胆儿。
壮壮胆儿。
He said, "Okay, I'll do it, but I need a drink of wine first. I need some liquor first."
走。
So this is 范进.
中了，真中了！身穿一件大红袍，带一带来摇一摇，上了金鳌玉洞桥。哎，我不是有关物质的后不道，我不是七品之国万千不草。你是哪一个啊？我本是
Basically, he's talking a lot of
神
nonsense.
大智考，风之恨问我走一遭。
哎呀，皇上，真是荒唐啊！
He says, "Nonsense."
我这个只靠最公道，定下章臣有一条，
哪一条？
不过无事我一概足不要。本道不取，嘴上无马。
He's basically fantasizing that he's the chief examiner and he's not gonna pass anyone under 50.
你骂我，
哪个骂你呀？
你笑我穷，
哪个叫你穷啊？
我要考你呀，
靠我过来！
我要考你呀！我定下问题叫大事故，句对仗，听得要巧，考得你昼夜把心。
He's basically, I'm gonna test you, I'm gonna make you take examinations and waste your whole life away.
等检讨，考得你不分苗和草，考得你手不能提来，肩不能挑，考得你头发白，牙齿穿条，考得你弓背有驼腰，年年考，月月考，我考死了你这命来一条。畜生！
This is the slap coming up.
说什么了？你别在这给我丢人现眼喽！你瞧，我说打不得不是，动不了了。
揉吧揉吧，你揉揉。
霎时间执着的神魂清晰，大英雄，众位英雄，
He's back to sanity now.
有只见众高临面前所。
Okay, well, let's stop here. Just well, let's show a dramatization of this scene. Okay, well, that's all I have. So we have about 40 minutes left, and this is the group discussion. So everyone, yeah, please just share what you thought of the story, good or bad. You know, if all opinions welcome. And yeah, so if you want to, let's do it the raise hands so we're not talking over each other. Kyle, please.
No, I mean, yeah, I found it fascinating, the story. I mean, like, not just the story in general, but the scholars, as the sixth classical Chinese novel compared to like the other big five, I've always found it very compressed. Like, it's very condensed compared to those other five. Like the other five, it's not that I don't think that this one deserves its title of the sixth classical Chinese novel, but I think that this novel, more than any of the other novels, deserves a better translation. I'm just going to put it out there that like this translation, the translation that by the Yangs, the one that you got, it's the same one as the online, the one that you're using, is weaker than the other ones. It needs annotations and it's kind of dated from the 50s. I think it needs a better translation than that one, but I like the story.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great points. Yeah, I'll confess, I'm not, because I read these things in original Chinese, so I'm not very well versed with translations, different versions. So I appreciate you pointing out which ones are better. Jason.
Yeah, that's great. I watched the Peking opera. It's very fun, and I'm not sure in this world, except Pin and I don't know who else will enjoy the opera. I'm not sure.
It's definitely a waning part.
The other one could be your father, Pin, and he already passed away. So,
yeah.
But anyway, I think the opera did a very good job actually. The Mr. Hu, the Bachelor Hu, and the Fanjin, they all play very well, and the language is very good. So I really enjoy. I don't know you will show this one. You know, it's very good. You know, in my opinion, it's wonderful. And then I agree with Kyle. And I also want to thank Kyle, because I'm walking along on the street and I heard Kyle's voice, and it very clear, and they give me a chance to replay in English. It give me a different feeling on that. I agree with Kyle. This one, I always think it should not be as good as the other five. Okay, but I know, Pin, you and me, we talk about this. You seems like this novel a lot than me. And then because this, and I also have a plan to introduce 6 novels, I start to read it. And probably I'm getting a little bit older. from before, and then probably I spend more time, in last year, I spent more time study Confucianism, and then that one make me, because I understand Confucianism much more, okay, so probably give me another different feeling. So I probably will try to spend more time to read this one. Yeah. Thank you for this one.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Also, yeah, thanks again to both CK and Kyle for the excellent reading. Really appreciate it. Joseph?
Sorry, I had to step out of the room for a minute. No, I mean, I thought it was an interesting story. Primarily, I think it gave some context as to how important the exams were, and essentially the family dynamics, and sometimes the what it was like to maybe come from a peasant family at that particular moment in time, or a poor, impoverished family. So I think from that perspective, I also agree with Jason that having read Confucius, I have a deeper appreciation for what this is trying to portray, yeah, even when we're talking about the areas of study that the classics, being trained in history and law, and I remember going through all that with Confucius, but we were talking about the entrance exams and the importance of them and how they determined essentially your status in society. So I think that this gives the perspective of how somebody can overcome in particular their circumstances, because also people that had come from a higher class often were the individuals that were given the opportunity, from what my understanding, to serve in those higher positions and pass the exam. They had more resources. That's my understanding. I don't know if that's accurate. I also have a couple of other things that I could say, but no, I think it gives context to the times, and that's what any story is actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the reasons why I really like this book. This story, I really feel like I'm actually at the scene watching this happen, and seeing, so somehow it just comes very close, very relatable to me. And some of the language, like I think the butcher said, why don't you piss on the ground and see what your reflection looks like? That's when I was a kid, when I might get a little conceited or arrogant, that's what my mom would say to me, like, well, why don't you take a piss and see what you really look like? And also the one about the butcher, like, oh, every day you're white knife in, red knife out. Even modern days, when the local gangsters, when they try to blackmail people, they say, if you don't do this, it's going to be a white knife in you and the red one coming out. so it's kind of amazing, after these hundreds of years, this common language still, this kind of sense of not humor, but irony, ironic humor, if you will, is still the same. CK and then Penny.
Since this novel is a satire and it's supposedly to be taking the piss at the scholars, I think that the title itself, as mentioned earlier by Kyle, needs some rethinking. I have a suggestion regarding the translation for the title, 儒林外史, right? So if you translate it in the spirit of taking the piss, it could perhaps be translated as an alternative history of the confused scholars. Because that's really taking the piss.
That's a good one.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
No, I'm just saying that, like, the translate, I agree with that, because like it's not just an unofficial history of the examination of the confused scholars, but the translation. What I think one scholar, one critic of the novel says is it has like this, not just this proto-modernist feel, but the translation needs like a wealth of annotations. This like, and it needs more fleshing out of it. The prose is kind of dry, and there's actually some they don't translate all of it. They kind of Bowdlerize some of it, so that some of like the dirty bits aren't translated in the translation, so they kind of hide some of it in the original Chinese, if I remember correctly from this essay I read of it. So it needs a lot of work, the original translation, the one by Columbia University Press.
Yeah, I find myself never happy with translations. And when I first started doing the meetups, every time I would do my own translations, but it was just a huge amount of effort. So I've gotten lazy, Jason, sorry. No, I just use whatever translation I find and not worry about it. But so yeah, well, anyway, I appreciate you, everyone pointing out the insufficiencies of the translations, which I agree with. And also agree with the title. Yeah, the scholars, it really loses the real essence of the original title, the Weishi, the outside history. You know, it's kind of like if you see a book in English, it's the unofficial or unauthorized biography of such and such famous person, right? The unofficial biography of FDR. You know, it's going to be filled with some you know, unofficial history. It's going to have a salacious book. So this kind of has the title of the book itself in Chinese has the tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. Yeah. Penny?
Oh, I thought it was good. It's the first Chinese story like that I've read. And, you know, knowing it was satire, I read what was in the 52 Living Ideas to Read, which was, I think, the first part of the story too. And it was really funny when, you know, well, kind of they paid for the guy to take the exam and then he passed. And then when he said, well, gee, maybe I should just let my secretaries read the exams. Maybe I should actually do it and read it. So as if to say that it was like these official positions who, you know, didn't really do anything then. It was just, you know, once they had the title, they could get to wear the fine clothes and lead the good life. So I thought it was amusing. But I did have one question, just like with Chinese, you know, like once he passed, then people were bringing him, you know, gifts and money and everything. And was that as kind of like a bribe because he was going to become a more important person then and maybe he could do something for him? Or was it just that, you know, they were so pleased that he had passed?
It's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. I wouldn't say maybe bribery is too strong, but investment. Because so once you get the Juren title, you can walk into the county magistrate's office. You no longer have to kneel and kowtow, and you can actually have the audience of the county magistrate. And the magistrate is very powerful. The magistrate is not just the administrative leader of the county, but also the court, and also the local you know, militia forces. So it's a military, political, and judicial chief all at the same time. So yeah, so basically once you're chosen, you're kind of like a local attorney, if you will. You know, you when people have problems or they're accused of something, you can go in and talk to the magistrate and try to iron things out.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, and then Joseph.
Yeah, I like the CK talk about the translation. He called, I think he not by mistake, right? He said the confused scholar, and I think that probably bring the satirical part of Confucian Confucian scholar. We call them confused scholar. I think the Chinese name I think the 外史 we call it an official history account. That's easy. But the 儒林, right? It uses the word 林, which is jungle or forest. In my image, it's more like a jungle. So to me, when I read these two words, 儒 means Confucian scholar, and he used the word jungle. So my picture is a bunch of tree or a bunch of people like a stick standing together, totally confused, or totally don't know what they are doing, or they know what they are doing, but only they do is pass the exam, nothing else. That's become the means, become the end, for these people. So that's that's why I think the 儒林, the jungle of Confucians, is to me, it's the key part of the title of this book. And when I think, Pin, you told me you want to talk about this book probably long time ago, years ago, and then I'm not so appreciative on this book originally, but right now I do, because I also compare, because I reread it and I find out this one has the same structure of the water margin. Okay, so basics, water margin talk about martial art, the people who using knife, kung fu with the strong muscle. And this part talking about a lot of people who is gentle, scholar, okay, they're bookworm, okay. So two contrasts and they're the same style. Of course, they have a different purpose. So I gradually feel this book has his own position now in the Chinese novel, because in my opinion, through the 1,000 years history, Chinese doesn't produce good novel. And then if you want to find the sixth one after that 5, this one could be a good candidate, because another one could be the Western case, right? 西厢记, right? But I'm not sure it's worth it or not, but I don't know. And the Liao Zai, I think Pin, you introduced us the chatter, the house of chattering about the ghost story. But this one could be the good one. I'm going to spend some time to do this one. And I also interested to how for the person who first time read this one, how do you get the satirical part of this book? Just like when I read the Gulliver's Travel from the Jonathan Swift, right? I have no idea it's satirical. Okay, I only think that's it's a children's book, but you have to understand the English culture during that time that you got the satirical part. So I'm very curious how does the people who first time read this one, do you get the satirical part of this novel? Thank you.
Joseph, and I see Joseph and Kyle.
As far as the satirical part, kind of, but I will say, I mean, I kind of got that when I went through it, but it didn't slap me in the face, put it that way. But the one thing I was just curious to know as to what is, many times when we're telling stories, we're trying to communicate a specific message, right? At a particular moment in time. And what is the kind of specific message that is trying to be conveyed, in the sense, is it trying to put a primacy on education? Is it trying to say persevere? Is it, in the sense that you can be older and you still pass the exams? Is the main message to just tell a story about coming out of a difficult situation in order to become was it a Jared? I think it was. That's
yes.
correct. Yeah. So I mean, so if you were to pinpoint like the main point the story was trying to communicate, what would it be? Because there was a lot of different running themes going through the entire time, and including the comedy as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it has different layers, but to me, a lot of it is actually revealing the hypocrisy of people, also kind of undressing these people, these scholars that are so revered in society and throughout history. But actually, a lot of their attitudes and behavior is very, very shallow. And then there's the society around them kind of amplifying this shallowness. You know, the butcher, he looked down on this son-in-law so much. It's just like bad luck. You know, what have I done wrong in the past to deserve my daughter marry you and this and that, you know. And you know, just 2 days ago, he was throwing F-bombs on this guy. And then all of a sudden, when he learned that this, he won the provincial exam, and said, oh my, he must be a star, you know, a star from heaven that's transformed into a human being. You know, just the radical change in attitude. I think it's really kind of revealing the underbellies of society and shallowness. Kyle.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that you can understand the meaning of the story itself, having read this book several times in comparison with the other 5 classical Chinese novels, and I've kind of come to this conclusion. It's not enough about the translation, but I think that it's subtle. It's the subtlety in the narration style that is different. I think the best way to compare it to the meaning of the novel is like showcasing the transition between the narrative style of romanticism in literature versus realism in literature. So if you compare like the other 5 classical Chinese novels, they're all like 100 or 120 chapters, but they are all like anthologies of poetry. This one is like a realist novel in the style of a Flaubert novel, where it's like Madame Bovary versus Goethe's Faust. You know, like instead of the verse drama of like Shelley and of Lord Byron, you get this like very more pared down style that's more like trying to convey it, and it's more subtle. It's like Mad Men versus like the style of like Mad Men's like sense of humor versus the sense of humor of like Big Bang Theory. This very like subtle style of narration that is trying to convey it more humor. So I don't know. It's interesting how like when you contrast those styles to the Chinese, there's a lot of cultural context that's lost with the translation. I'm not trying to like crap on the English translation. It's that with the cultural context, that it's like this critique of Confucius values that were implicitly used in the Confucius in the examination system, and the hypocrisy of that examination system, and what it used, and the literary inquisitions, the way that it's making fun of, like it's kind of poking fun of the literati in a sense, like the erudition, the highbrowness of scholarly life in a sense. Like people who are so literate, they're like, oh, you can't, and that's why it's written in vernacular Chinese. It's not written in the classical Chinese of like the other novels. It's written in this like vernacular, more down-to-earth style that conveys the more immediate humor, but again, it's a more subtle humor than the big 5, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Great summary. I think that's one thing I really love about this writing style is the subtlety. It's hilarious and subtle all at the same time. It's yeah. And Carly.
Well, yeah, I think the humor hit me outright. I laughed out loud a few times reading the story. And I don't know if it really was. I don't know if it was just because I was aware that it was a satirical novel. I do think that the juxtaposition of the Confucius values and our study of Confucianism first, and Jason prepping us for being critical of that helped. but I thought it was hilarious in its own right. And I do see now Kyle's point about it written in a certain way from earlier English or language, and I didn't know the reference to the drakes and whatever either. But the change in the characters and the obvious hypocrisy, the lack of character insofar as the hierarchy not being truly necessarily one of meritocracy, but more of traditional hierarchy and status. And then, like when he made fun of the poet, I found that particularly funny because this was also a story that was satirical in its own right. And how dare you study things that aren't of orthodoxy? But no, I thought it was really funny, actually. And of course, the butcher father-in-law having to take credit for all of the his knowledge that he made everything happen and all the shame prior to such. But I had a lot more to say. This is a great story. I really enjoyed it. So, and Kyle, thank you too for your additions, and Penn, thank you so much for yours and reading and all too. It was just, yeah, great time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ria, for sharing what came across. I was very curious about that because, you know, when Jason and I read it, we're laden with we're fish in the water, you know, and it's very interesting to me for someone who didn't grow up in this culture to read it and what you get out. So it's but it sounds like it's very universal, actually.
Well, maybe I will add that I am a fan of American subtle humor from Kurt Vonnegut Jr. and Mark Twain, and those that a lot of people may miss because some of it is tongue in cheek and it is about the satire, which may not come through as easily as just straight up sarcasm or whatnot. So that might have led into my hilarity of it too, but thanks.
Yeah, you brought up Mark Twain. I think, yeah, that's a great analogy. Also, yeah, the points in the story that you pointed out, the more subtle, yeah, it comes across to me too. The examiner chiding, yeah, the second guy for studying ancient poetry, saying that's, you know, just like the focus on, you're supposed to just study to score well on this test. How dare you have some genuine interest in real literature? Yeah, you know, it's just stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, Penny and Jason and then CK.
Yeah, as other people have said, I mean, it was the first time I've read it, but, you know, clearly you could see that they were poking fun and, you know, just like with the butcher, which I'd pointed out too, you know, was, you know, like this horrible son-in-law I have who's like useless and, you know, can't take care of his family. And, you know, he doesn't even give any food to his wife. She hasn't eaten lard 3 times since she married him. And then quickly it's, oh, she had many suitors that were from high families and, you know, they were really great people, but no, I held out for, you know, I knew that there was somebody better coming for her that was going to bring, you know, our family up. It was, you know, so amusing to see the switch. And there was a lot of those things. So I think it clearly, even if you aren't immersed in the culture, you can see that they're really poking fun at these people.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. You know, I see a hand up from Subha, and I'm gonna ask her to go first because she hasn't spoken before yet. Yeah.
Thank you. I may have a unique, well, I get a different sense and a vibe, and I read it also for the first time. I actually didn't get the satire part of the story. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Actually, on the contrary, it felt sad and almost too real and too personal to me, because I come from a culture, again, it's very cultural, right? Where personal identities are so linked with our accomplishments and taking exams and passing them. That to me is it's almost contemporary to my generation, that right, maybe in some even current generations, it's, even though it's very old story, but I said, wow, this has started there actually so many years ago, so many decades ago, or so many centuries ago. So that's the perspective that I felt about this. It's like how I was thinking from the main character perspective of, if you didn't pass the exam, you're almost considered no good. If you pass the exam, you just became somebody different. And what would that do to that people that have not passed the exams all along? How do they feel, right? So that's what I was thinking. That's really what I wanted to say here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's totally true too. It's that's why I like this novel. All of that is true. It's written, it's funny, but it's written with a lot of pain for sure. Because a lot of people suspect Fanjin, the main character, is actually a self-portrayal of the author himself. And like you said, this is, a lot of it, it's really, it's in our culture too. Oftentimes we tell very painful stories with pretending like it's humor. That, right from the opening scene, right, for that time, he was an old man already. And but his title is a child student. And then the examiner asks, like, how old are you? And he's so embarrassed about his age, he lied on the registration.
Yeah.
And then he, how many times have you taken the test? More than 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been so put down so much that when asked the reason, he said, well, my writing just simply too poor. But how sad is that? He says that, but he keeps taking the test because there's no other purpose in life. There's nothing else he can do for his life except to keep taking the test, even though he never passes. So that's why, yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I also like the book that it really tells us a lot about actually the culture and how people really lived at that time. All these details about what his house was like, and also even you see in the butcher, right? Our beliefs is really Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, all mingled together. The concept of hell, the concept of stars, and then, he's going to be punished by the Buddha. It's all mingled. There's no really separation. We call them different religions, but in China, it's really all twisted together. So there's a lot of layers you can go into that. In this one story, actually, if you keep digging finer and finer, there's a lot of things you can extract about what society was like. Jason, CK, and then Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. Pete, you just talk about the religion. So I just like to mention that here you talk about the king of the hell, okay? And actually it's Yan Wang, right? And actually this one is from Hindu, right? From the Yama, okay? So if you remember, SK talk about a story, that's Yama, okay? That's Yama, and that time already been deep in Chinese mind, become the Yan Wang. Okay, so the king of the hell, and they have their bureaucratic system over there. If you read the Journey to the West, then you will know that. And then just like respond to what Suba talk about, she feel sad about this one. I do feel the sadness on this part, and this kind of sadness still come in today's society. I will point out this one a little bit later because I raised my hand. Basically, I want to respond to Joe's question about how do you come with 10 points? Okay, from this one you learn, and I only come with 5. But I just want to quickly talk about this. First, I hope everybody get this point. How much time does a learned person spend time to study? That seems that's the only thing they want to do. There's nothing else, right? And then you also can see how people respect the people, not respect the learned people. They respect the person who passed the exam. learns the person. The people respect the people, not because this people is good, because this people being judged by an objective system. So, okay, you pass, so you are good. People start to respect him. Probably for no other reason. Bribery, future benefit, probably they don't think much. They just think about, that's the person, that's the good person. And they talk about study, but since nobody care about the contents of Confucius' teaching, they only care about how to pass the test, how to be judged as a good Confucian scholar. They don't care how much you know of the contents, right? And then during the conversation, we also know at that time they consider poetry, literature is secondary, is not that important, or only the essay are important. So I think that's all very important point from this time. And I think another thing I want to leave to the last is a lot of people talk about hypocrisy about the people, but I don't see this way. If you look at the butcher, the father-in-law, and the examiner, the wife, the mother, and Fanjin, they're all nice people. If you see this one in your village, even the butcher, okay, the father-in-law, even it's a snobbery, but I think they're all very nice, honest people. They have a good heart. But why they, even the Zhou, the examiner, right? He tried to understand why Fanjin cannot pass. He want to read the second time, the third time, and try to reward him for his best. But if we look at all around these people, why they behave this way? They are very good people. But the sin, who make them behave like this? I think that's the Confucianism or bureaucratic system. This system is the greatest evil on that, because when they want to do good things, they have to follow this system. If you don't follow this system, you cannot do it. So they only do good in certain way, which is Confucian, or I should call it neo-Confucian way to be good. I think that's the biggest part I feel, by reading this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Great points. CK, Joseph, and Carly. And then we'll probably wrap up.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little about what Jason just said. I deliberately used the confused scholars to take the piss, so that's deliberate because I think it's satirical. But upon further reflection, based on what Jason said earlier about Rulin, the fact that it's like a jungle, as he said, I think I may have a better translation of the title, just because I thought of it. How about an alternative history of the confused scholarly masses? Masses, that's Lin, right? So it's a bit of a translation. Perhaps it could be more closely aligned with the original text. I also thought about the satirical part of this story, and it reminded me of some of the stories of Honoré de Balzac, the short stories, and also of Guy de Maupassant, where they depicted the way humans behave under different conditions. So this story is an example of how a certain group of people behave under a certain cultural condition, which is quite interesting from that perspective. So that reminded me of these other European writers, French writers who had similar depictions of humanity and how they behave under conditions of, say, duress or conditions of extremism or extremity. And lastly, I was quite puzzled when the translation in the text that you were shown by using ducks and drakes shows that it is a rather dated translation, because I mean, other than if you go to an English public school, I don't think that many people know what ducks and drakes mean these days. So there is an element of the translated text being already dated. So maybe they need to do another edition of it.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. Joseph, Carly, and then Jane.
I'll be very brief. I mean, I really just wanted to kind of build on what Jason was saying, and I was thinking about it, how the actual state dictates the values of the people, and then that determines how the families actually interact with one another. And that's something that's, I think, really powerful if you're talking about telling a story or kind of communicating that message. And I think we just in another group read Antigone, and where it was actually state power versus family loyalty. And it was a different type of story, but it was kind of this compare and contrast. Like some people stuck towards their family, some people stuck towards state power, but it seems like in this particular instance, the state's values are all that matter, and that's dictating how the family interacts with one another. So I think that that's a really important point, and I think that is somewhat disappointing, and so that's all I had to say with that. That's where maybe the comedy was kind of lost. I mean, and then failing, as you mentioned, failing 20 times, and just because of the essay part, that was like that was kind of, all right, well, is this about perseverance at a certain point? That I was trying to figure that aspect out as well. So anyway, so that's where my mind went when we went through this.
Thank you. Great points. Carly, and then Jane, and then we'll say goodbye to everyone.
Okay. Well, yeah, real good points. I think Jason's input on seeing the family in that sense has given me a different perspective, because I was looking at it very from the sense of an American individual and somebody who empathizes with somebody that hasn't succeeded in the right way in the right time. The family structure being just what it could be in the glory of the state, that it wasn't so much about the individuals as it was about the system. But moreover, to I think it was Suba's point about the sadness of it, and that yes, the reality hits close to home for me too. But I think most of the best comedy always comes from that pain that is within. So I saw that early on when the old man was put in a cell, and he said that his clothing came out with more holes than he went in with it, kind of thing. That was going to be lighthearted, but you could see that on the emotional level, it was a lot deeper than it was just lighthearted and shabby clothing. And I think the main key of it, to Joe's point, is that it is on some level about perseverance. Is that even if you failed, that you're still going to try, because there's value in that, and whatever the value is, you got to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great points. Jane?
Hello. I've got 4 things to say, but I'll try and keep them very brief. 3 of them were questions and then a comment. So one question is, was education at the time, I'm guessing here, was only for men? That's one thing. Secondly, I'd like to know about the butcher, whether his job meant that he would have actually passed this exam himself, or was that not necessary? I'm just wondering. I'm very curious about the essay that the main protagonist wrote, because first of all, it was read and thought to be utter rubbish. And the next time he could see a glimmer that maybe there's something to this. And then the third reading, he thought it was absolutely brilliant. Best thing he's ever read. So I'm wondering, is that essay ever, does it come into the story at some stage? Do you get to actually discover what the essay was about? Because I'm really curious about that. And my comment is answering, I suppose, the question of that Jason asked about the people who didn't grow up in a Chinese culture, which I didn't, of course, what are we getting from it? Well, I think I'm missing absolutely loads, clearly. But so why am I here? Well, I'm here to learn. I'm really interested to understand much more about Chinese culture and history. You know, China is such a important country. I mean, all countries are important, but China has increasing sway over the world. And I think the rest of the world don't really understand very much about the culture and the history. So it's just one of my things I think we should learn a lot more. And seeing as how I'm the last speaker, I should say, thank you very much. And if time restrictions, I'm in a completely different place in the world from you guys. And I'm here in New Zealand. But if the time suits, it's not the middle of the night or something for me, I will return. And thank you very much to everybody that's contributed.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for joining us and for your intellectual curiosity. That's great. To answer your questions real quickly, first one, the public schools were for men only, basically. Also the exam system. I'm not aware of a woman taking the exam. But that doesn't mean women were not educated. They were just educated privately. The second question, what was your second question?
The butcher, would the butcher have, because of his job, would he have passed the exam?
No, he was, I think the portrayal of him was an uneducated person who didn't have an interest in that. And number three, the essay, you know, I had the same curiosity as you. It's like, what about this? No, the quick answer is no. I don't believe in the book we find out whether we ever get to see the essay or what it was about. I can only imagine that the book does describe a lot of how people prepare. They have special tutors. It's kind of like in the US, like hiring SAT tutors. You know, they specialize in how this test exam essays. There are different test-taking techniques and styles that you study. It's not necessarily good writing. It's just the writing that you know the test is looking for. So he probably wrote something that did not conform to that very tried and true formula. That was probably not formulaic, but there was some actual real meaning in his essay. This is all my speculation. That's what I think.
Thank you.
CK, you want to close us out?
Yes, I'd just like to try to answer Joseph's question about what the point is about the novel. I think from my understanding, it is about the absurdity of the human condition. It's not about perseverance. It's not about you know, doing your best or whatever. It's about the sheer absurdity of it all.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think it's a very preachy novel at all. Quite the opposite. The book is not trying to send you a message like a moral lesson or something, but it just, yeah, like you said, it's an illustration of life in its absurdity.
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks so much. We're a few minutes over, so I'm gonna say goodbye to everyone and say thank you. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pen.
All right, thank you. See you next week. Yeah.